Senate will come to order for this Tuesday, March 1st. Sounds nice, March, doesn't it? Roll call.
Legislative Day number 12, Tuesday, March 1st, roll call. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Here. Beitman? Here. Boner? Here. Bouchard? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Driscoll? Here. Ellis? Present. French? Here. Murphy? Here. Guru? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? Here. James? Here. Kinski? Here. Kolb? Present. Cost? Here. Landon? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Here. Pappas? Here. Perkins? Here. Rothfuss? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Steinmetz? Here. Wasserberger? Here. President Dockstetter?
Here.
30 present.
Prayer by Pastor Lebovich.
Good morning. Please join me in prayer. Father in heaven, you urge us in your holy scriptures that if anyone lacks wisdom, we need merely ask you for it, for you give generously to all without finding fault. And yet we are cautioned further by your word that when we ask, we ought not to doubt, for a doubting one is unstable in all their ways. Likewise, we are cautioned by the example of Solomon, to whom you gave more divine wisdom than any other merely mortal man. And yet, in the end of his life, he squandered it, choosing folly over the wisdom that declared to him that he ought to know better. For Lord, in all these cautionary caveats, the center is true, that true wisdom is not simply found from you, it is found in the pursuit of you. And so, Lord, today we humbly ask you for wisdom. Wisdom to do what is right in your good and pleasing will. Wisdom to act upon the convictions that you have given us. But most importantly, wisdom to quiet our hearts and seek you, the Lord of all peace, righteousness, justice, and wisdom above all. Lord, these men and women have great authority set in their hands by the people of this good state of Wyoming. And as the fictional character Spider-Man yet has said so well, with great power comes great responsibility. So, Lord, we ask for wisdom to exercise the authority that you have given us rightly. Authority ultimately to do only what you have given us to do. We are stewards. Stewards of the state, stewards of our people, stewards of finances and law, certainly, but Lord, we are stewards ultimately of you, your wisdom and your will. Cause us to steward what you have given us well, and may you get the glory for it. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Senator Cole, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time we're going to turn some time over to Senator Baldwin and others to make a presentation. Senator Baldwin, where did we lose you? Senator Baldwin, Senator Beitman, please come forward. I'm going to give you this mic up front here to make a presentation, if you would, please.
Somebody would write this mic is intimidating, whoever said that. Fellow senators, it's my pleasure today to introduce someone to you, a very special person. You know, I went and had dinner with some of these guys last night, and I think we entertained the president. We told a lot of old fire stories, and good stories, entertaining stories, but nobody remembers the details and more stories than this gentleman right here. This is Mr. Gene Dietrich. He's from Newcastle. He's with the Newcastle Fire Department. I'll tell you when he was born, and if it embarrasses him, that's okay. He was born in 1941 in South Dakota. In 1961, I believe, he moved to Newcastle, joined the Newcastle Fire Department. He has a wife who's probably the whole hero of this story. She's not here, so she can't defend herself. Joy, who has been his wife for 59 years. So this year will be 60, I believe. Is that correct? 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. He joined the Newcastle Fire Department in 1961. He spent 6 years as chief. And more impressive to me is he did 40 years with a department drill team as a participant. Not an organizer, but a participant. And if you've ever been around fire drill teams and those competitions, that's pretty special. I think of it a young man's game. He thinks he is a young man still. Just going through some of his list of accomplishments, and I certainly can't read them all because there are many. He's a 60-year member of the Wyoming State Firemen's Association. He spent some time as president of that board. He still serves on the Volunteer Fire Pension Board, which he helps to establish that foundation. He's the executive secretary. I believe you're still the executive secretary of that group. He's also the mutual aid secretary with nearly 1,100 members. That's a foundation that provides death benefits to members' beneficiaries in the death of a firefighter. I say it's around 1,100 members. I know I'm a member. I bet Bo's a member. Senator Beitman. He's with the Wyoming State Fire Chiefs Association, and he's served in many leadership positions there, including the president. He's assisted in founding the Wyoming Fire Academy Foundation. He served as a board chairman. The state of Wyoming acquired that, and when they did, then he was no longer the chairman, but he still works with that foundation. And if any of you have that opportunity, I know in Senator Salazar's district, in the Riverton district, it certainly is worth going over to the foundation. That's very special. And you'll see a name on the Wyoming Firefighters Hall of Fame that was inaugurated in 2020. And this gentleman's on that list, and that's a big deal. And finally, this last year, he was honored with the Newcastle Fire Department for 60 years, and last week he was honored by the governor. And they named March 8th, 2022, the Fireman Gene Dietrich Day. So with that, I will turn this time over to him. I think he would like to say some words to Mike. He says he likes to talk.
It's my pleasure to be here today. I don't have a speech prepared, so it's going to be very short, but I want to thank the legislators for having me here today. I feel very honored, and I think it's a great honor for the fire service and for you to honor the fire service. It's a very esteemed group. I worked with you, some of you, for the last, I've probably been coming down here for 40 years or so. So we've done a lot. The legislature means a lot to the fire service, and we definitely appreciate you all. Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Yes, just a quick additional privilege, Mr. President.
Granted, please do.
I'd like to announce some guys that are standing up here, if we can keep them standing, and we probably added some to the list. They've been trying to keep me current, and I know there's more there than I have on my list, so if I don't name your name, just wave and look important, okay? You'll notice that these guys have been hanging around the legislature a lot. They do every year, but these guys in uniform, some of them just in ties and name tags, but these guys come to talk with legislators about fire or fire service, what they do, what we do. And so I'm just going to read off some of the names, the ones you've seen around here a lot. Lanny Applegate can wave at us. He's a former state fire marshal. Jeff Keel with the Riverton Fire Department. You know I'm in medicine, I can't read my own writing. Kim Locke with the Riverton Fire Department. Byron Matthews with the Cheyenne Fire Department. Eric Quinney with Uintah County Fire. He's normally really tall, he stands out in the crowd. We have Mike Reed and Mark Young from the State Fire Marshal Office. Both gentlemen that I've worked with in the past. They tell a lot of stories. If I tell you anything about me, it's not true. Jason Kahi with the Laramie County Unified Fire Chief and crew. Anyway, okay. And everybody else that I didn't name just has to wave. I know you're firemen, I can see it in your eyes. So, gentlemen, please welcome these gentlemen to the Senate.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Senate. Congratulations to Mr. Dietrich, a lot of years of service. Just point out, if you didn't catch it, one of the first things that Mr. Dietrich did was acknowledge his fellow firefighters. And that's important amongst those who help keep us safe. Thank you. Senator Hutchings,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I have privilege of the floor?
please do.
Thank you. If you look above the president, fellow senators, you'll see a group of beautiful women and handsome young men. They are, you can stand up, they are team-packed. They're a group of Christian homeschoolers that are involved in civic education. We see them here in the Capitol every year. Their state coordinator is Cindy McKee, and two of their student leaders are Izzy Striley and Daniel Travis. Please, Tracy, my bad. Please welcome them to the Senate.
Thank you. Any other privileges this morning? Okay, thank you. We'll proceed then. Nurse of the Day, Rhonda Bowler from Gillette. Is she here? Did Senate acknowledge her? Step up just a little bit so they can acknowledge you. Thank you for being here and keeping us safe. Thank you. Today in Wyoming history, President Ulysses S. Grant signs the act establishing Yellowstone National Park. Quote for the day, Albert Einstein: "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Session status. Today is the last day for third reading in the House of Origin and Crossover. Reminder, Friday, all interim topics must be submitted. And again, a reminder about our 2 o'clock appointment with the House to honor our fallen Marine. That'll be at 2 o'clock. They want you over there and sitting and being ready at that time at 2. Chairman Perkins, do you know? Okay. Thank you. Bills on first reading from the House. Now let's catch journal real quick. Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. President, your journal committee reports that the journal of February 28, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Cole, the chairman.
Thank you. Any objections? There being none, the report is adopted. Bills on first reading, House Bill 88.
House Bill 88 engrossed, name change, notice of publication of minors amendment. Sponsored by Representative Harshman. Passed the House, ayes 47, noes 12, excused 1.
House Bill 88 referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. House Bill 125.
House Bill 125 engrossed, workplace injury assistance, information and guidance, sponsored by Representative Conley. Passed the House, ayes 59, excused 1.
House Bill 125 referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. House Bill 63, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 63 engrossed, county and district attorneys' salary amendments, sponsored by Representative Greer. Passed the House, ayes 38, noes 19, excused 1, conflict 2.
House Bill 63 referred to, House Bill 63 referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. House Bill 107, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 107 in Water State Revolving Funds Amendments, sponsored by Representative Simpson. Passed the House, ayes 53, noes 6, excused 1.
House Bill 107 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. House Bill 89, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 89 engrossed, monthly ad valorem tax revisions enforcement, sponsored by Representative Greer. Passed the House, ayes 51, noes 8, excused 1.
House Bill 89 referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. House Bill 31, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 31 engrossed, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program, sponsored by the Education Committee. Passed the House, ayes 46, noes 13, excused 1.
House Bill 31 referred to Committee Number 4, Education. House Bill 3, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 3 engrossed, State Land Leases, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee. Passed the House, ayes 57, excused 3.
House Bill 3 referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. House Bill 5, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 5 engrossed, Wild Horse and Burro Management, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee. Passed the House, ayes 57, noes 2, excused 1.
House Bill 5 referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. House Bill 73, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 73, Omnibus Water Bill Planning, sponsored by the Select Water Committee.
House Bill 73 referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. House Bill 54, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 54, State Parks Recreation Management Authority, sponsored by Representative Larson. Passed the House, ayes 50, noes 9, excused 1.
House Bill 54 referred to Committee Number 6, Travel, Rec, Wildlife. House Bill 10, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 10 engrossed, Tribal Reference Amendments, sponsored by the Select Tribal Committee. Passed the House, ayes 59, excused 1.
House Bill 10 referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 15, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 15 engrossed, Political Subdivision Club Liquor Licenses, sponsored by Representative Summers. Ayes, passed the House, ayes 52, noes 7, excused 1.
House Bill 15 referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 55, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 55 engrossed, Liquor Licenses Airport Exemption, sponsored by Representative Waters. Passed the House, ayes 44, noes 15, excused 1.
House Bill 55 referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 60, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 60 engrossed, Fiscal Training and Enforcement of Financial Reporting Laws, sponsored by the Management Audit Committee. Passed the House, ayes 58, noes 1, excused 1.
House Bill 60, first reading of the House Bill. House Bill 60 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 62, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 62, Insurance Amendments, sponsored by the Corporations Committee. Passed the House, ayes 47, noes 12, excused 1.
House Bill 62 referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 76, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 76 engrossed, Single Office Real Estate Brokers Licensing Requirements, sponsored by Representative Duncan. Passed the House, ayes 59, excused 1.
House Bill 76 referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. House Bill 18, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 18, Off-Road Recreational Vehicle Registration Amendment, sponsored by the Transportation Committee. Passed the House, ayes 53, noes 6, excused 1.
House Bill 18 referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. House Bill 81, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 81, Operation of Motorcycles Disabled Persons, sponsored by Representative Burt. Passed the House, ayes 59, excused 1.
House Bill 81 referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. House Bill 82, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 82, Military Discharge and Benefits, sponsored by Representative Wilson. Passed the House, ayes 58, noes 1, excused 1.
House Bill 82 referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. House Bill 123, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 123 engrossed, Mine Reclamation Disposal of Materials, sponsored by Representative Barlow. Passed the House, ayes 57, noes 2, excused 1.
House Bill 123 referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. House Bill 108, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 108, Funeral Service Practitioner Amendments, sponsored by Representative Hallinan. Passed the House, ayes 59, excused 1.
House Bill 108 referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. House Bill 110, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 110 engrossed, Board of Psychology Behavior Analyst Regulation, sponsored by Representative Larson. Passed the House, ayes 54, noes 5, excused 1.
House Bill 110 referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. House Bill 117, first reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 117 engrossed, Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact, sponsored by Representative Kinner. Passed the House, ayes 56, noes 3, excused 1.
House Bill 117 referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. Reports from standing committees.
February 28, 2022. Mr. President, your Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 33, Community Health Services Continued Redesign Efforts, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Senator Baldwin, Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 42, engrossed, Local Government Distributions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 47, engrossed, Local Impact Assistance Payments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 79, engrossed, Employment Support Fund Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 7, engrossed, Commercial Vehicle Driving Disqualification, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Furphy, McEwen, and Pappas. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Pappas, Vice Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 16, Military Assistance Trust Fund, Authorized Uses, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Furphy, McEwen, and Pappas. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Pappas, Vice Chairman. February 28, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 17, Veterans Facilities Surrounded by Grazing, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Furphy, McEwen, and Pappas. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Pappas, Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Bills on second reading. Senator Furphy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have privilege of the floor?
Please do.
We are visited today by the 8th grade of Snowy Range Academy from Laramie, and their teacher is Karsten Heiser. So please help me welcome them to the Senate chair.
Do. Thank you, Senator. Senator Wasserberger, did you have privilege? Okay. Bills on second reading. Senate File 51, second reading in the Senate file.
Senate File 51, Fairness in Women's Sports Act, sponsored by Senator Schuler.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
Senate File 51, second reading amendment to number 1, delete.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absent any objection, I'd like to withdraw this amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Amendment has been withdrawn. This is second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 51. Absent objection. Let's move on. Second, the next amendment, please read it in.
Senate File 51, second reading amendment number 2, delete.
Thank you. Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 51 and ask for your favorable consideration. Really, what the meat of this amendment does, if you take a look at page 3, it was taken out of the standing committee amendment the other day, the causes of action. We've just added in 2 really simple paragraphs. D, no government entity, licensing or accreditation entity, athletic association or association or organization shall take any adverse action against a school district or institution of higher education for maintaining separate athletic teams or sports for students of the female sex. And then in the cause of actions 21-25-103, any student who is harmed by a violation of this chapter or who is subject to retaliation or any other adverse action by a school district, athletic association, or athletic organization as a result of reporting a violation of this chapter shall have a private cause of action for injunctive relief, damages, attorney fees, and any other relief available under the law against the school district, athletic association, or athletic organization. So really, I think what it does, it just gives us the appeals process. It's probably, this language is probably more simple and more concise than the original language that we had in the bill, but it does give us an appeals process that I think is workable, and I think it's a good compromise with what we had from the first day. And also I added through some amendments, not amendments, or information about some of the causes of action that have been taken around the country. I know that doesn't exactly go along with the amendment, but I just wanted you to make sure that you had all the information available about what's out there. So we do need to have this in our bill as is. And so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Discussion on the amendment, discussion on the amendment. Let's go to Senator Rothus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's unclear to me what D does, and honestly, to some degree, what government modifies. I don't get the sense that government is modifying athletic association or athletic organization, but I could be wrong. So I seek a little more clarity from the sponsors. Is this only restricting government, fully government entities, or is this restricting athletic organizations or athletic associations that would not be governmental from taking any action, which seems like it would potentially be restricting access to courts by a private institution? So I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly or incorrectly, but I think it would be useful to help understand on that.
Any further discussion or questions before we go back to the sponsor? Back to you, Senator Schuler.
I think there's somebody else, sir.
Senator Steinmetz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment, I think it clears up some issues that we had on the amendment we defeated yesterday. And I think D is pretty clear. It's just no government entity, licensing, accreditation entity, athletic association, or athletic organization. So that's who we're talking about. And I thank the good sponsor of the bill for bringing this good amendment and ask you to vote aye.
Senator Scott?
Mr. President, I don't want to be repetitious, so I'm just going to say I agree with the previous remarks exactly. I think this improves the bill.
Further discussion, we're going to go back to you, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I think to answer the good senators, my seatmate over here, yes, that would include, school districts, anybody that's a government entity. Doesn't take into account private organizations or private clubs or that sort of thing. So hopefully that answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Ready for the question on the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment has passed. That is second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 51. We're back on the bill. Any discussion? Any discussion? Senate File 51 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 70, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 70, Revisor's Bill, sponsored by the Management Council.
There are no amendments. Any discussion on the bill? Senate File 70, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 83, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 83, Prohibiting Chemical Abortions, sponsored by Representative Salazar.
There are no amendments. Discussion, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, yesterday, in the interest of time, I deferred discussion on this bill, and I do want to say a few things about it. Mr. President, this is a bill on the subject of abortion, which is an issue that deeply divides our society, with people having very strong opinions on the moral issues that are involved here, opinions based both on their religion and on their strong personal beliefs. And the question before us with this bill, Mr. President, is how does a free society, particularly a free society like ours with our First Amendment, deal with an issue that produces the kind of deep divisions that we have? I'm going to suggest to the Senate that one of the things we have to do as a government is show respect for the opinions of both sides and to show practical implementation of that respect. There was the issue previously of government paying for abortions. In 1985, this legislature passed a bill that essentially prohibited that. Very limited exceptions. You can see it at 356117, it's still on the books. I was involved in that. I voted for it. The reason we did that was that we felt that that the people who are strongly opposed to abortion should not be taxed to provide for it. That's showing respect for them. Now, Mr. President, what about this bill? This bill takes a position on this issue that is the doctrine of many of our churches, not all of them by any means, but many of them. And it was expressed by the sponsor saying that this bill was going to save a lot of human lives. And that position is that the human life, the existence of a human person is at conception. That is the doctrine of many churches, Mr. President, and that doctrine deserves respect. However, it is not a universal doctrine by any means. My church does not believe that. My church believes that it is the right of the prospective mother to decide whether or not to prevent or terminate that pregnancy. And the trouble I have with this bill is that it establishes the religious doctrine of one set of churches and prevents the members of my church and a number of other churches and a number of independent people who disagree with that doctrine from, as a practical matter, following the tenets of their belief. Mr. President, I think it doesn't show the degree of respect for that religious opinion that this legislature showed for the anti-abortion provision earlier, years ago, when we took that step I spoke of earlier. Mr. President, when we have a bill that establishes the doctrine of one church and essentially forbids the application of the doctrines of other churches. We have a bill, it is a bill to establish religion that violates the First Amendment to our Constitution, both in spirit and, I believe, that violates the letter
Senator
of the
Scott,
First Amendment.
Senator Scott, I'll have you look for a concluding comment. You're at time.
So for those reasons, Mr. President, I'm going to vote against this bill. I wish to say to my opponents, the proponents of this bill, that I will continue to respect your opinion, your right to hold that opinion. What I'm objecting to is establishing it as the law that those of us who do not happen to hold that opinion, whose church believes otherwise, have to follow. So, Mr. President, on and against.
We're on Senate File 83. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the good senator in his speech. I've heard it before on bills. I'd like to take us to our Constitution, the Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Section 20. It says, "The freedom of speech and press, libel, truth, a defense. Every person may freely speak, write, and publish on all subjects, being responsible for the abuse of that right in all trials for libel, both civil and criminal, et cetera, et cetera." By that, we all have the freedom to speak on any subject. And I don't believe this is an establishment of religion. In the First Amendment, we also have the clause that you have the freedom of speech. I think this is a worldview clash, not a religious clash. So on and for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senate File 83, second reading. Any further discussion? Senate File 83, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 100, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 100, Redistricting of the Legislature, sponsored by the Corporations Committee.
There are amendments. Read in the First Amendment.
House Bill 100, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, delete.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 100 and ask for your favorable vote. Ladies and gentlemen, like I mentioned yesterday, as the de facto leader, I guess, of the 60-30 caucus, that I would be running a plan to go back to the original 60-30 plan, and that this plan that I came up with overnight, and with that, I put out the invitation for anybody that was interested to work with me on amendments to the proposed plan yesterday. I had a lot of great feedback. I had members from down the hall, I had members from this body, and we got together with LSO and hammered out what I think is the best plan, and I'll tell you all about it. I believe this is a common sense plan that's pragmatic and it works for the whole state. It follows our redistricting principles, checks all the boxes. It's the least disruptive plan, and it keeps districts as close as possible to their current boundaries. And most importantly, it respects communities of interest and respects physical barriers, because our state is not a cookie cutter state. It may be a nice rectangle, but within it, you have mountain ranges and all sorts of different physical barriers that prevent people from, it separates communities, these mountain ranges do. And so as watching this whole process unfold, the bending over backwards and the game of Twister that this body has been playing to try to get within this deviation and avoiding the reality of these common sense barriers, I think that's where the things kind of got sideways. So my goal, Mr. President, is to bring it back to the original come back to the beginning, look at it with clear eyes, and come up with a plan that works for everybody. So what we did last night, I came up with 6 changes to my original plan from yesterday. Rebalances House districts in Sheridan and Johnson counties. Makes Sheridan, takes care of the problems that my colleague from Senator talked about yesterday. Just Campbell and Converse County House districts to mostly align with their revisions provided to the Joint Corporations Committee on February 11th. Number 3, it removes 1 voting precinct, the Valley precinct that we talked about yesterday, that was completely cut off due to the Owl Creek Mountains and the Boyson Reservoir and all that over in there in Fremont County. Rebalances House districts in eastern Casper within Natrona County. It rebalances House districts in western and south central Wyoming, impacting Lincoln, Uena, Sublette, Sweetwater, and Carbon counties to mostly align with the Region 10 Submission 2 provided to the Joint Corporations Committee on December 28th. And lastly, Mr. President, it rebalances House districts in Albany County to ensure the districts meet deviation requirements based on the moving Rock River from House District 14 to House District 47 proposed by Representative Summers as part of Region 10 Submission 2. So all in all, what you have here, net, you have 59 out of 60 House districts within deviation. The only one that's out is in the basin, which by definition, the basin is surrounded by mountains, has a canyon at the south end, physical barriers, but we're only off 442 people out of a population of Wyoming of 576,851. So we're 0.076% off. Or we're talking 442 people represent 0.07% of the entire population. I think this is pragmatic. I think this works. I think this makes more people happy than the 6231 plan. It's less disruptive, and I think it's a plan that we can get behind. And I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, discussion on the amendment. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So yesterday I made it very clear when I saw the map that my chief concern was the Valley and those constituents of mine. And I also made it clear yesterday that I was very hesitant with the 3162 plan. After seeing this this morning and last night, I'm satisfied with this, and I can support this because it protects my district, it protects the Valley, and it gives the preference that I had all along, which was a 3060 number both for the Senate and the House. So given what I'm seeing today, it protects me, it protects my Senate district, and it enhances my preference of a 3060 state legislature. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion. Ready? Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. President. My only concern is House District 28 looks like it's a negative 9.64, which is considerably higher than the deviation. That concerns me a little bit just because the original one we started out with the Bighorn Basin was all of them lower than that, running around 6.2 negative deviation. I just wonder if that's too high and going to be a concern. That's my question.
Let's collect a few more before we go back to the sponsor. Senator Driscoll, and then Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few things. One, this goes right back to the committee spent months grappling with whether we stayed in deviation or not. Falls back to what we decided we couldn't do. And this is a policy decision of this body, and you can fall out of deviation if you want. We had it on really solid terms that if the basin is out of deviation, overrepresented, there's going to be a lawsuit. So I'm not saying whether there is or not, but my guess is the plan's probably going to get challenged if it's out of deviation in the basin. That was really what moved us back. I was one of the ones that pushed pretty hard on the deviation factor, still do. I'm not overly confident of where it all falls. I questioned the sponsor if he got a hold of the clerk in Fremont County, because we're dealing with the overriding rule of everything, which is you can't mess with the Indian reservations, and it's really a fine line up there. And I question if they did that. I'm not saying plus or minus, but if we mess up with the reservation, that's a slam dunk. Plan goes down. So we need to be really careful, and maybe that can come back on third. I find it really interesting. What this plan is a rehash any used pieces of 6 or 7 different iterations the committee did. We worked our rear end off to try to figure out how to do it. And what this really is pieces of failed plans that everybody shot down. And you can accept it or not. We're at a policy point between the 30-60, but you just found out after he went back and did the redo that you can't do a 30-60 and keep it in deviation very easy without really angering a whole bunch of people. So if you don't want to come back, because I really do question whether every precinct and every district's really in line. Every time we did one of these, I'm guessing, but it's 30 to 60 staff hours to make sure that all the tables and everything match on precinct lines. We also went back to clerks and lined them all up. And my guess is, if you want to talk about unintended consequences, when you vote on third reading, whatever mistakes we made are going to be law, and there's not a fix for them. They're done. You're there for the next 10 years. So if you've made a mistake, we're going to live with that mistake. I'd really encourage you to stick with what came out. It's vetted, it's done, it's been run through by everybody. Is it loved by everybody? No. Is it something that actually works? The answer is yes. Word of caution as far as mistakes that are made, because every time we did this, we'd come back a week or a month later and have to go back and retweak the plan. We did it every time. This time we don't have the week. Third reading, we make a vote on it, and you may have a chance to do some minor tweaks at conference, and that's it. I'd encourage you to repel this amendment.
Senator Scott?
Mr. President, this represents largely the committee plan as it existed for quite some time. It started, eventually there was a motion passed that passed just after this plan was the one that we were working on. To add an 11th House district representative in the Laramie County area. There never was a Senate plan that went with that. I don't think they could draw a successful one. And that's started the whole evolution of things. I have one problem, Mr. President, with this plan, and that's the deviation issue on the Bighorn Basin. But that's the place in the state because of our geography. I think you're most likely to have success in a court test with being able to go out of deviation. I still think it's running too much risk. I think we're better off staying in deviation. Mr. President, 2 things. First, I'm going to call for the yeas and nays on this. Just it's important enough, I think we ought to make a record. Second, I've been flipping a nickel mentally for the past few minutes after hearing the description of what they've done and how close to being within deviation we are. I'm going to vote for this plan, but I promise you I'll bring back, if it passes, I'll bring back an amendment tomorrow that will get us back in deviation. You can decide on that issue as a pure issue. So I do think we need to be in deviation, but I do think this is an improvement on the plan we have before us now. So on and for, but it's second reading. I'll be back on third to get us back in deviation, if that's the will of the Senate.
Further discussion on the amendment. Let's go to Senator Cooper, then back to Senator Landon in that order. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the Valley Precinct over there, with the exception of what has been pulled out for the reclamation project, all the rest of that area is Indian lands. And this puts those Indian lands back in makes it more contiguous with the other Indian lands that are there. And it's the right thing for that area to keep it back in where it is. So that does put us out of compliance, but it's pretty minimal.
Senators, back to you, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. I didn't weigh in yesterday because I didn't want this to really be about my district. You know, this is a team effort that we're trying to get to here, so I get that. I just wanted to let the committee know that today I am compelled to support this, and I appreciate the work of the senator from Sheridan County for a couple of reasons. If you had the opportunity to take a look at my district, Mr. President, I was sending 5,000 or 6,000 voters who have elected me 4 times down the river, and they would probably be represented from that point forward by Converse County. I love my friends in Converse County. In fact, we consider one of those little towns in Converse County our little brother, but they'd have more votes than we would. So that's the reality of that thing. And the little community that I've taken great pride in representing for all these years, where the Oregon Trail Cemetery is, where our veterans reside, would go downriver. They'd be gone for me. And I don't have any choice but to at least stand up for those folks today. And I'm willing to work with everybody in the room. I'm going to support this amendment, and I'm going to watch my friend from Natrona County and work with him, and I'll work with all of you, and maybe we can make that a little bit better. I understand the value of 6241, 6231, but it really, really hurts my part of the world. And I need to support this one today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stood up yesterday to talk about the issues about growing government. I probably didn't do as good a job as I'd like to have done. The issue isn't about growing it by 1 right now, even though I'm not for that. It's about the future and how we solve our problems. We solve our problems by working together. And I think every time things go awry, and I think the corporations did as good as they could do with this. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. But we have to solve our problems, in my belief, with the current group of people we have. We've got 30 good folks in here working for the state of Wyoming. We need to stay within those bounds and figure out what to do, because we can do that. So I'm on and for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, go back to Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, pretty obvious the way it's going to go. I'm going to make a couple statements, being we're not talking about the state anymore. We're talking about individual areas. That's what I'm going to talk about now, because I did this plan for the state. Sacrifices all the way around. Now let's take a look up in the Northeast. Let's talk about what we represent, because it's interesting. Nobody stood up and said a whole lot. We had a county up there wanted to be whole. They're not only cut, they're cut to the point now that they have no representation on either half as far as being able to have somebody. You've cut Weston to the point. You didn't cut them the way it was before. You've now really taken it where they have very little chance to have anything. Campbell County came in. They put their shoulder down. They wanted 5 reps in their county. That's what they put everything on. I represent them. I backed off and watched this plan go through. What have you done to Campbell County? Take a look up there. They get the Natrona County split now. They get to pick up Converse again, and they don't get their 5 reps. And they don't get their Senate seats laid the way they did either. So what you've done is everybody in this body, and I am angry, we spent months on this. The plan's for the state of Wyoming. It's not for my district or my people. It's for the state. And what we've done now is broken it down to regions with large numbers of reps. And what do I want for my district? Let's look at the whole state. I know where this is going to go. And it's going to be really interesting to watch as we go down the road and try to reconcile all this and put it all together. I'm going to watch it from the side. If this goes to a 30-60, I'm with the body. That's what we do. But be careful what you wish for, because it might not be quite what you think at the end of the process.
We're on the amendment. Any further discussion? Ready for a question on the amendment? Oh, Senator Cut. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. We heard similar testimony in the interim for favor of this plan because it was the least disruptive. And it's curious, I heard it in here again today. And it is true, it's already been pointed out. For how many of you stood up and said, my district? So I'm glad the ayes and nays have been called, because this plan ensures the greater likelihood of success for all of us to come back. It is self-serving. It works, we know it works, and there are advantages to that. But I just want it to be clear, it is certainly the least disruptive, and that is certainly the most telling. Good senators, it is the most telling. As I mentioned yesterday, Laramie County looks virtually the same. There's some modifications that need to be made. Senators, pay close attention, but it looks the least disruptive. However, it does not acknowledge our population increase, which is concerning, provides the most standing for one particular county in challenging any plan out of deviation. Word of caution. Again, good senators, this is a challenging time. Support the other chamber, support the work of your committee. And I think it's a lost cause, but I would be remiss if I didn't send out that warning.
Senator Scott, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Mr. President, for my second time. This plan, I think, works better for the state as a whole. And no plan is going to be perfect. I think it works better for the state as a whole. But I keep hearing this Laramie County population growth. The population growth in Laramie County was acknowledged in this plan. It wouldn't be within deviation if it hadn't been. Right now, there's a Laramie County district that reaches up into Goshen County and takes in the prison population there, some other population, but mostly the prison population. We were able to get rid of that because of the growth in Laramie County. That put Laramie County in deviation. They have all along thought that they ought to get an extra representative because they were entitled to 10.46. This plan doesn't do that. And because it doesn't do that, it works, I think, better for the rest of the state. Keeps us, I think, by and large, closer to the county boundaries. There's advantages and disadvantages, both of them. But it is a myth, the allegation that this plan does not take into account the growth in Laramie County, because it does, and it districts Laramie County entirely within Laramie County and entirely within deviation. Mr. President.
Let's go over to Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to thank the good senator, actually, since we're talking about our districts. I think my district's a little bit better in this plan. I see a lot more of my friends that I currently represent that I'll be able to continue to represent should I come back. But I'm against the bill, or against the amendment. And here's why. One reason only, really. The one thing we're supposed to do, the one thing that's sacrosanct in this process is to be in deviation, one man, one vote. Central underlying principle of our entire democracy, and that's what we're supposed to encapsulate in this process. And while this plan is, as the good senator from Laramie County said, comfortable and helpful to those of us that are here, it violates that. I'm against, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Senator McCune?
Thank you, Mr. President. If we look through this document, it says the one man, one vote is when practical. It says we can make different decisions. Now, I personally have never said my district. And I spent a lot of time at these committee meetings. I followed this all the way through, mostly because I didn't understand the process and I wanted to learn. But as we come up with this, I'm grappling with one question. Why is the 3162 a better plan for the state? We keep saying that, but I don't see why it's better. And as far as comfortability and getting reelected, none of that's behind my motivation. But understand this, those people that we represent, our constituents, elected us out of that area for a reason. We didn't go anywhere and have our name drawn out of a hat. They wanted us here. So if we want to look after them, that's what we were elected to do. And yes, Campbell County did push back on some of the plans, as did other counties. That's what we do down here. So I'm on and for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ralphus, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, for my first time, hopefully my only time. Mr. President, on against the amendment, and I did want to address some of the concerns that were raised. I had the pleasure of spending an awful lot of time during the interim engaged with Redistricting Committee through the Corporations Committee, despite not being on it, and also had the pleasure of drawing perhaps 50 maps over that period of time through one of the mapping products to really understand the challenges. And Mr. President, getting to the question, which is a good question, why 62? It is incredibly challenging to draw a compliant map with 60 because of the basin. That's the answer. If the basin had 3,000 fewer people, no one would have considered 62. If the basin had 3,000 more people, no one would have considered 62. Regrettably, the basin has managed to have exactly the right population to make it nearly impossible to draw, even if you start with the basin, a 60 House member map that doesn't either go out of compliance or transgress heavily upon Fremont County or transgress heavily upon Southern Johnson County, which doesn't make any sense geographically, or transgress upon Natrona County or some combination thereof. There's also the challenge of the changing population and the way the population shifted with the 60, where you don't have the relief and you end up with this little bubble problem that gets to Laramie County, gaining population in the southeast, and then other counties losing population, specifically in the basin, where it's hard to push that bubble in a way that doesn't really screw things up with the Senate seats. If you do go to 62-31, you actually alleviate all of those concerns. It becomes easy to restructure the Senate seats, and it becomes easy to put in 2 new House seats that alleviate the pressure. And this has been done before. It's not a new thing. The Senate and the House have had different membership than 60-30. There's nothing holy or sacred about 60-30. It's not in the Constitution. There's a great deal of flexibility. In fact, they don't have to be nested. There was a suggestion of that the other day. Most of the reason to have nesting comes down to the Herculean effort that it would lead to for our county clerks if you didn't have nesting. You can just imagine how many different ballots they would have to print and how challenging it would be to communicate to people where they live. So there was some convenience there. But that's the justification. And it gets back again to the deviation. If you don't want to hold as your first principle one person, one vote, it definitely becomes a lot easier to draw the map. But I can assure you, whether it's somebody from Laramie County or elsewhere, if this map as drafted were to pass, there would absolutely be a court challenge and the burden of proof would be on the state to provide assurances that it needs to be this way and to justify it. And that could be possible. It could be possible to justify that, but to the extent that we've seen, I don't know, at least a half dozen compliant maps that didn't go out of deviation, I don't know why the court would rule that going out of deviation is okay. To the extent that the basin is overrepresented by this map, you have a circumstance where anyone else in the state that isn't in the basin has strong standing to bring a case indicating that they are underrepresented as a result of the overrepresentation of the basin. So pretty much everybody else has standing. So what happens, Mr. President, if it's brought to the court and the court says, hey, this isn't acceptable because we've seen a half dozen other maps that are fully compliant. You don't have any justifiable motivation to go out of compliance. Well, there's probably two possibilities, and I don't know what the court would do. One would be special session time. I don't want to do that. 6231 ensures we wouldn't do that. The other is that the court just says, oh, heck with it. We're going to pick one of these compliant maps. I want that even less. But they can do that. Or appoints a third party, independent entity to come back and draw this map. They can do that. If we draw a non-compliant map and pass that, those are all at risk. If we draw a compliant map, then the burden of proof is on anyone else bringing a lawsuit. We're not going to lose that, Mr. President. On and against.
Thank you. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question for the bringer of the amendment. The way I understood it is the only thing that's out of compliance with this plan is House District 28. If it is what we have to do to bring the Valley people into House District 28, we can represent them very well. The senator that's currently representing them and myself, we'll work together. We'll make that work. Because if that's what's right for the state, we can do that. That's not what those folks want. But sometimes we got to do what's right for the entire state. So if that's the only hang-up to this thing is the Valley precinct, I'm more than happy to represent those people. I like those folks. They're really good people. I go to Shoshone now, so we can make it work, especially if we do it in cooperation with my neighboring senator. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion, we are on the amendment. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just heard a question about why is it better? And certainly that is subjective. And how does one determine what is better? But from a very high level conceptually, more representation obviously is better because that's the more voice of the people, right? And so representation that is closer to the people and has the ability to engage with the people arguably equates with better, right? Better representation. And so theoretically, right, just bear with me for the purposes of understanding this, more representation allows for more effective representation. Did you know that the Wyoming legislature has one of the largest Senate districts in the entire United States? From the senator from Baggs. Geographically, he does. That's hard to represent. You can ask other legislators that represent multiple counties. I feel fortunate that I only have one. I think that's far easier to understand the issues facing that county. So adding more helps that legislator be more effective in their representation and understanding those issues, arguably is the theory. Whether you want to default and say, goodness, you know, more politicians, growing government, whatever arguments can be made against that. But that generally is the concept, right? So when we're looking at the challenges that we experienced in the state of a declining population in our rural areas and an increasing population on our borders, and we look at redistricting, adding 3 more legislators helps to solve the issue of too large of geographic areas, whether it be from mountain ranges or other just distance, and also address the increasing population. Again, you heard from all of us, I don't want to add more legislators. This room is small enough as it is. But that is the basis on why people finally felt compelled to go forward with this plan, is more effective representation in our rural areas by adding more people and also acknowledging the population growth. So whether you think that's better or not is certainly up to you, but that's some of the rationale.
Thanks a lot, Mr. President. So here's what I don't like. We're not being presented with the plan that we're going to end up with, because this is a slippery 2-step thing. Oh, vote for this. It looks pretty good. All you guys are there. And then tomorrow we have an amendment to bring it all in deviation, and we'll have to vote for that. We will have to vote to bring it into deviation, and then you're not going to like it. I don't see why we can't have a plan that comes to us that's in deviation so we all know what we're getting. Because this is a bait and switch. It is a bait and switch. Now, how are we going to get it in deviation? We've heard discussion about that. You can take some of it from Natrona County, wipes out about half the geographic area of Natrona County. Johnson County, we really didn't explore that, but that's a possibility. We talked about Sheridan County, and they brought us a phony baloney plan from Sheridan County that said, well, it's going to take too much instead of just taking the right amount. That wasn't fair. Then we got, you know, the Valley folks, they'll put up with it. They're good people, but I went to pitchforks and hot tar, and I was about strung up in Shoshone. People were mad about this whole thing anyway, and they were really mad if they were going to be moved. And my good colleague senator was there too, I think. This is a bait and switch. This is not fair. This is not good work of the Senate. We need to look at a plan that's in deviation and see the consequences of that to make an evaluation. To use this kind of method to vote for one and then we're going to have to slip you into another is not fair. Vote no. Ask them to bring a complete plan.
Okay, back to Senator Beitman. Let's bring it back to him to wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is not a bait and switch. This is not, I knew the personal attacks would be flying today, but that one's below the belt. This is the plan. The whole thing I presented. We are only 446 short of the lower end of the deviation for the whole state. That's a good plan. That is close enough, Mr. President. We are making perfect the enemy of the good, and we're going to throw everything out and screw up the whole map and even add 2 House seats and a Senate seat, over 446 people. I think any sane judge would see what we're doing, Mr. President, and say, you guys did a good job. There's no political motivation in this map. We didn't touch the minority party. We followed this to a T. But some people are so hung up, Mr. President, on this 10% deviation, they can't see straight. And evidently, Mr. President, they can't think straight. And it's time for fresh eyes to take a look at this. Yes, the committee worked all interim on it, but now is our chance as a body to take a bite at the apple. We haven't had that chance. Our regional plans got thrown in the garbage multiple times. So let's have this debate. This is the plan. We're not switching it. If a senator wants to bring an amendment to try to bring us into deviation for 400 people because they're so afraid of that, come on. This is it. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Ready for the question? Question on Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 100. Roll call requested.
Roll call on the amendment. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? No. Ellis? No. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. On the amendment, 22 aye, 8 no.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 100 has passed. There's another amendment. Read it in.
House Bill 100, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, delete.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask to withdraw this amendment at this time.
Absent objection, second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 100 has been withdrawn. We are back on the bill. Senate File 100, having been read, House Bill 100 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Reader, please read in standing committee report from Committee 2. This is regarding House Bill 1.
Mr. President, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations reviewed House Bill 1 pursuant to Joint Rule 14-1E. The following lists are provided, dispensing with further reading. Senator Perkins, Chairman.
House Bill 1 is referred to third reading. Let me just make that official. In accordance with Joint Rule 14-1F, House Bill 1 is referred directly to third reading. Bills on third reading and final passage. Senate File 50, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 50, Government Waste, Fraud, Abuse, and Whistleblower Protection. Sponsored by Senator James, an act relating to the administration of government.
There is an amendment. Read in the amendment.
Senate File 50, third reading amendment number 1, page 3, line 3.
Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 50, and I ask for your favorable consideration. So I gave everyone a copy of the bill with this amendment worked into it, so that way it's easier to follow. It should be on your desks. I was working with fellow senators from Natrona County, and we cleaned it up and worked out some of the kinks that were addressed. So we'll start there, going through the amendment. Page 3, line 3, after employee who we added knowingly to make sure we had that in there, so that way we don't get anyone that made a mistake. So this has to be a knowingly type situation. And then also on page 3, we add a new Romanette, and we make sure that we classify the report as unfounded if the evidence shows the person or entity reported did not commit the waste, fraud, or abuse alleged, or that the action reported does not constitute waste, fraud, or abuse. So we just want to make sure that everything is classified until it's actually proven. So we're not dragging anyone's name through the mud unnecessarily. And then further down on page 3, we want to make sure instead of going to the AG that this is referred to the proper authority of the proper prosecuting attorney. So we want to make sure that it goes there as well. Then if we go on page 4, and talking with another elected, and she suggested that the director is not an appropriate place for contested hearings. It should be under the Office of Administrative Hearings. So I removed the director from that and put the Office of Administrative Hearings, as that would be the proper location for a contested case. Then if we go to page 5, we delete crime and insert felony, because we want to make sure that it's, if we're going to be having this type of teeth in a bill, we want to make sure that people with misdemeanors or lower crimes are not brought into this, so we're making it a felony instead of just a crime. Then if we go to page 6, we're starting on line 8, we're deleting entirely and inserting has been convicted of a crime or has been discharged from governmental employment because of a finding of waste, fraud, or abuse pursuant to this section. So we're making sure that no one is brought into this that has not been convicted, has not gone through their process, has not had their time, and everything. So, and finally, on page 7, line 14, we're adding that no person accused of or investigated for waste, fraud, or abuse under the section shall be publicly identified. So once again, protecting the innocent until proven guilty. So that's basically the amendment. A lot of cleanup and a lot of clarifications, but all in all, I think it addresses a lot of the issues that have been brought up over the years. So I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm going to save my question for the bill.
All right. We're on the amendment, folks. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 50. Any questions, any discussions? Ready for a question? Question being called. Senate, third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 50. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment is passed. We are back on the bill. Senate File 50. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions I've had on this bill all along, and I'll try to couch it in some actual examples, is when we get to the definition of abuse, and it says it means excessive or improper use of governmental property. And on the surface, that sounds really good, but my biggest concern is here, we're going to catch a whole lot of people under this, and I don't know if the amendment clarifies that or not. So let me give you an example. Over the years, Mr. President, in my job, we employ a lot of high school students, a lot of summer seasonal students and stuff. And on more than one occasion, I've had 16, 17-year-olds get a couple of citations for speeding. And so the way I would read that is abuse means excessive or improper use of governmental property. I would think that when you get cited for a violation under the law, that would be captured as improper use. And so I even think back to my time as when I was a graduate student at the University of Wyoming, and the speed limit was 55 on the interstate. And I'm sure there's other governmental employees that have more than one speeding ticket and probably a government vehicle in their lifetime. And I just want to know if those individuals are going to be captured under here. And now would they be subject to a felony penalty under that? I'm not sure exactly how the amendment works in there. And Mr. Chairman, I have the same concern when we get over here with waste, because over a period of time, again, employing a lot of these young people, I can give you numerous examples. For one reason or another, a 16 and a 17-year-old get together and decide to break the shovel handles on a job that they're out there doing. And would that constitute waste? We've had young individuals working with weed and pest districts around the state that Friday afternoon decide that it would just be more expedient to dump a load of herbicide on the side of the road. Is that waste? And so my concern is it's without being able to track the entire amendment in, this thing's very broad. And is there a significant level of unintended consequences to that? Maybe it was resolved in the amendment. I haven't had the opportunity to track that in, but that's just a couple of real life examples that I see that may come into play here that could be unintended consequences that I'm sure nobody in here, and I'm sure the bringer of the bill wasn't intended to go out there and do, but just a question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Perkins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Worked on this bill with the prime sponsor last night, along with the much taller senator from Natrona County. And one of the reasons I did that was that just sensing this body was going to pass this bill out of here, and I needed help to do that. And did we solve all the problems of this bill? No, we did not. But I think we got it to a place where if it can continue to work, and it actually might get someplace that we could all be pretty proud of. But just really briefly, as you go through the bill, and what it really does now is it sets up a hotline that you call. Then the Department of Audit is going to be required to investigate those hotlines. It's been amended now so that they can classify a report as unfounded or inconsequential or insignificant and cast that to the side. And so it does allow for that now, where before that wasn't necessarily in there. So it grants some discretion to get between those transgressions and transgressions that are material or significant. Now, I see by the yawn of the president that I better hurry. Anyway, continuing to, and it allows them to analyze that, and then it simply refers it off for prosecution. If there's a crime, then that's referred off to the appropriate prosecutorial jurisdiction, whether it's a district attorney or a county attorney or other. And so it allows for that. It gets it so that if a hearing, if you're a governmental employee and you've been accused or named in that, you do have the right to get it to a hearing, but the government doesn't have it. The government doesn't force the government to go to a hearing anymore like it used to. And so then it also still provides the reporting that ultimately there's a report on the website of the Department of Audit of the results of these things that were deemed not to be immaterial. There's a report that comes out that then provides what's happened, how that was disposed of, and then ultimately what the corrective actions are. All those, I think, are pretty decent. Coming back to the specific question you had, if you look, the definitions in the bill have not changed. Waste is still waste, and fraud is still fraud. Abuse is still abuse. Abuse is simply the excessive or improper use of government property in a manner contrary to its lawful use. So the example that was given just a minute ago about, and I had a few of those tickets too when it was 55. I was in college. Part of that time I was driving back and forth to college, and I can guarantee you I didn't obey the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. But there's also the ability now in here for them to realize, and the state doesn't pay the speeding ticket you do, but it is obviously an unlawful use of a state vehicle in that example. But there's also the discretion now to recognize that those are probably just highway miles. And then fraud still is fraud. And the waste is still just simply the thoughtless or careless expenditure, mismanagement, or abuse of resources to the detriment of the governmental entity. So they're very, very broad, but there is some discretion to move this forward, or that it can be dealt with so that those cases, it might just be, hey, don't do that anymore. But and that's the end of that. But those that are significant, it does provide for that reporting and that to continue on. And so anyway, with that, it still can need some more work, but I think it's a place now where it can get polished as it moves through the system if the body is inclined to do so. And I do intend to vote yes on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion on the bill. We are on Senate File 50, on the bill. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just one more if I can get some clarification as I walk through the amendment. And I understand now it sets up a hotline. Somebody would take that call. It's kind of used some discretion there, but is there a threshold as to when they would have to take an action? In other words, is it $500 worth of waste? Is it $5,000 worth of waste? So how does that individual that's receiving, the agency that's receiving these phone calls, make a determination as to what that threshold is and what level is significant? And so how does that work? And if we can get an explanation on that, Mr. Chairman, I'd probably be a little more comfortable with it. But is that just up to the discretion of the department? Is there rulemaking to determine what level of threshold constitutes significant to then elevate this to the next level?
Let's go to Senator Lannon, Senator Kinski in that order.
Well, Mr. President, thank you. You know, I really appreciate the Vice President's questions this morning because I've actually thought an awful lot about this bill, and I still have just this 30,000-foot feeling of unease about this bill. It's almost like we're hunting public employees out there to try to get one of them. And you know, I had a maintenance guy reach out to me, and he said, so if I inadvertently leave on a water station and the water ends up running down the street late at night, am I going to end up on a website somewhere? You know, that's the kind of impact that these bills have. You know, I know the titles are important because that's really what people think we vote on down here, but this bill has real consequences. The second part of what I wanted to stand up for is to thank my colleague from Natrona County. This, you know, this had no chance in my mind, and I have not been able to track this all the way through. That's the other thing that my good friend just pointed out. It's hard when you rewrite a bill like this. It feels like it's better, but I still have that sense of unease that, you know, are we gonna put somebody through the ringer that really doesn't deserve it? That's my concern, and maybe somebody can help me with that. Thank you.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I applaud the sponsor for the intent. I'm just not sure that this is, notwithstanding the substantial rewrite we got on third reading, that this is really ready for prime time. In fact, usually when you rewrite a bill that extensively on third, it indicates perhaps an interim look is merited. I'm also concerned about whether we really need it or not. For instance, we heard a lot about, I've heard concerns raised previously about Medicaid fraud, but this body has authorized new measures in our Medicaid program, including one, an automated verification system that when it was implemented, disenrolled 3,000 people. We have an 800 number already in the Wyoming Attorney General's office. The Medicare program has an 800 number. Anything involving a federal dollar, a dime of federal money, there's a federal OIG hotline, and then there's the Federal False Claims Act, which allows people to bring a private cause of action, which unleashes, of course, the plaintiff's attorney bar, where these cases have average recoveries of $4.8 million, and the whistleblowers themselves get an average award of $837,000. So there's already substantial incentives built in for anything that involves a dime of federal money, which is almost every department at the state. So given that we already have an 800 number in the Attorney General's office, I'm not sure what more we're going to be doing. The other part about it is when you talk about what my friend from Casper and from Bags were talking about, this thing casting too wide a net. And I was talking to somebody who, like I, agrees with me. We'd like to see more oil wells. We'd like to see more coal mines. And they had this vision of a process where something was moving towards complete authorization, and advocacy groups that really didn't want to see it happen filing anonymous complaints. anonymous complaints against the employees that were working on trying to get this work done. That complaint comes in, boom, you've got to get an APA proceeding going. You've got to lawyer up, you've got to defend yourself. You've got to get a subpoena out to whoever this anonymous complainant is. And certain advocacy groups could completely bog down the employees who are working on trying to get these new projects, these new authorizations through. And there are people of that persuasion who would do just exactly that sort of thing. So again, I'm worried about just the impact it could have on our energy businesses, on our economic development, if we had projects moving along and advocacy groups use this statute, which really does in many ways cast too broad a net to just shut down that process of approval. So, and again, I applaud the idea of what we're trying to do here. I just think it needs a little bit more work. And again, on the interim, sometimes these things take 2, 3, 4 tries to get it exactly right. And this is one of those. Great sentiment. We just need a little bit more work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. This is Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm for a bill like this. I'm for the concept of moving forward to address the situation. But I think some of this stuff was touched on here very recently in some comments. There are people out there that are adversarial to certain things being done, and they will try to use this to their advantage, not for the purpose that we're talking about, but for the purpose of stopping things or causing other folks to get mindlessly or needlessly investigated because of a complaint. I think the intent is good. I support the intent. I think we need to have an avenue for people to lodge complaints without having reprisal. However, people will abuse this. So I think it's, on the one hand, I believe this is a thing that has to be done, but this vehicle we're talking about, I'm afraid that there's so many loopholes in here that, you know, people with not good intentions will abuse this and cause a lot of grief for normal people because, frankly, they can. And I'm afraid that's just human nature. And I think it needs to be tightened up a bit and not let that be so easily an occurrence. So I would think that we could try to improve this. I know it's late. I think the work that was put on from the good senator from the Windy City, that's probably a lot of cities, but had some great amendments to it that helped us out a lot. But I don't want it to be abused and used as a weapon to weaponize a state statute against people that don't deserve it. And certainly the ones that deserve it, you know, because they are perpetrating fraud and people need protection. I'd like for that to be done also. But I think overall, I just can't be very supportive of this because of those loopholes. I want something. I want something that does the bringer of this bill's intent, the sponsor. I think it's good, but I'm afraid that it opens the door to mischief, the shenanigans, and I don't think that's in our best interest at this point, this late hour. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill. If we do find that anyone's abusing the bill, we could call the hotline and tell on them. So we've got that going for us. Question? No. Mr. President, but seriously, there's a 3-year sunset in the bill. The bill was just amended, not in a way that changed the intent of the bill or the construct of the bill, but to provide some good sideboards that provide protections for exactly the type of concerns that I think we've heard today. Things are just not going to go off the rails with the way this is currently structured. I don't think there's anything to fear. I do think we'll probably come back next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now when the sunset comes up and make it better. I really do. It's not perfect. Of course it's not. I haven't seen a perfect bill yet this session. Actually, I take that back. I had about 4 of them. But other than those, it's a challenge. And believe me, I share the concerns, and I had expressed the concerns to the sponsor where I didn't want to see a bill that led to witch hunts and harassment and abuse. And for the past 2 years, I voted against this bill. This is the third time it's come. I think the sponsor has taken those concerns very seriously. I hope the body will provide some support for it. Thank you.
The discussion, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, on for the bill, and previous speaker stole most of my points, so I will not repeat them. But, Mr. President, I did want to respond to the very real concern of an employee who does something as one of my colleagues from Natrona County expressed, leaves the valve on, some water goes to waste in consequence. That sort of thing does happen. With the amendment for that individual to get in more trouble than he was already going to get into with his boss for being careless, he has to have committed a crime, or he has to have done something serious enough so that he got discharged from public employment. And as we all know, that involves a hearing and an ability to defend himself. So it isn't going to be used to harass somebody who does make a mistake, and that happens. The world isn't really going to change for them, except maybe his boss might find out about a few more of the things. But it is, I think, not going to be abused by people who have a, should we say, a personality feud with somebody in the government and think they can just get them labeled and put on all the websites around. Ms. Chairman, we were very careful about protecting individuals from that kind of harassment. So, Mr. President, on and for the bill.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, on and against the bill. This gives me the eerie feeling of watching a World War II movie. There was a leader of a nation that decided to pay people to turn people in for things that he didn't like. And so they would turn in their parents, they would turn in anybody. I think they got paid for that. I think this feels similar, that we're setting up somebody to tattle on somebody that maybe is not guilty of that sin, and maybe he doesn't get some kind of law breaking, but he's on that list, as the senator from Casper talked about. He gets on the website that he's been turned in. This Führer's bill also had a 3-year sunset. 1945, we eliminated that bill. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to debate an important issue, and I just want to reiterate that I don't have any problem with the intent, but I just think that there are some things that we need to talk through. I wondered, I'm looking over at my attorney, I wonder if there's any concern over an agency that might take care of something that they should have turned in. I mean, did we put something on the books now that in public administration, you know, you oversee departments and you might run into something, you might try to correct with some sort of action. I just wonder if that pulls administrators, managers into the net. That's my question. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Oh, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I just heard so much about boogeymen. I got to tell you, the sponsor of this bill has done a lot of work on this. I mean, I can tell you when he first came in the chamber in committee, I had to vote against one of his bills, and he was working on something similar to this, and Department of Audit was there. And I said, let's go over and talk to them. And he's worked with them on specific issues where they said, why don't you try this? Why don't we do this? This is where we had a problem. So this isn't just some system of without checks and balances. This is all inside the Department of Audit where they've had problems and they couldn't pinpoint and they couldn't get to them and they had all kinds of reasons why we have had problems that have come to light, but it was too late. And the Department of Audits worked with the bill sponsor on this bill. So I just don't see the boogeyman in this bill. And I think that we'll be back next year if there's a problem. I just don't see it. It's not gonna be, he's done everything we can do to try to appease everyone who had a boogeyman come forth in this bill. And I think it's good. He's done a good job. And I think we should support the bill and send it down to the other chamber. Thank you.
Question being called. Senate File 50. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading, roll call, Senate File 50. Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? No. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? No. Cole? Aye. Cost? No. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter? Aye. Kinski, no to aye. Baldwin, no to aye. Hicks, no to aye. Furphy, no to aye. Cost, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 50, 29 aye, 1 no.
Senate File 50, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 50 has passed the Senate. Mr. Floor Leader, come up, take the chair for this one. We normally have the Vice President, but he's got an amendment, so take the chair for the next one, Senate Joint Resolution 2.
Senate Joint Resolution 2, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate Joint Resolution 2, Senior Citizen Property Tax Relief Constitutional Amendment, sponsored by Senator Dockstader. A joint resolution to amend the Wyoming Constitution by providing for a homeowner's property tax exemption for senior citizens.
There is an amendment. Would the clerk please read the amendment?
Senate Joint Resolution 2, third reading amendment number 1, page 3, lines 2 through 11.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. I move third reading amendment number 1, the Senate Joint Resolution 2. This amendment goes into the amendment we offered yesterday as the bill stands, and it adds language both in the substance of the bill and also to the ballot statement of the resolution. After the words elderly and infirm, it adds, if necessary for the support of the poor. So the whole thing would read, The adoption of this amendment to the Wyoming Constitution would authorize the legislature to provide for a property tax exemption as it determines necessary to preserve home ownership for the elderly and infirm, if necessary for the support of the poor. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, what that adds is an income qualification, and that's also in a different part of our Constitution. It's Article 16, Section 6, that talks about how we can make expenditures for necessary support of the poor. I'm worried that if we don't have the income qualification, we leave it all very wide open, and that we would have a situation where the Constitution would permit anyone that's elderly, who could be very wealthy, could have great income, could afford their houses, to get the same tax relief that others would make. So this tightens that up. I think it'll prevent abuse of the program and truly target it towards those who really do need it. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Questions? Senator Dockstader, President Dockstader.
That's what we're looking for, is to make sure that it goes to the right people. Friendly amendment. Thank you.
Question being called. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate Journal 2 has passed by the House. We have another amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate Joint Resolution 2, third reading amendment number 2, page 4, lines 1 through 3.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate Joint Resolution 2 and would ask for your favorable consideration. Members, all this does is go into the actual language that you will read on the ballot and reflects exactly what the constitutional amendment does. So if you go up there, it will say, if we go up to it, this is on the second reading amendment that we top. It says residential property may be exempted from taxation to preserve home ownership. But when we get down to the actual language that's on the ballot, it says this Constitution would authorize the legislature to provide for property tax exemption. I think that just is a little, adds a little confusion, Mr. Chairman. And the only thing I'm trying to do is when you read that on the ballot, it's exactly what it says is in the Constitution. It's just for clarification, is the legislature may. That's all this does, is provide conforming language between those two. It asks for your favorable consideration.
Questions on the amendment? Question being called. All in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to Senate Journal 2, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate Journal 2 has passed the Senate. Further discussion? Question being called. Senate Joint Resolution 2 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? The Chief Clerk will call the roll. This requires a 2/3 vote to pass.
Roll call, Senate Joint Resolution number 2. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? No. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate Joint Resolution number 2, 29 aye, 1 no.
Senate Joint Resolution 2, having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members elected to the Senate, Senate Joint Resolution 2 has passed the Senate.
House Bill 1, third reading of the bill.
House Bill 1, General Government Appropriations, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee. An act to make appropriations for the fiscal biennium commencing July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2024.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Members, what you should have two pieces of paper that will be, one of them will go, and the other one will be helpful. One of them is, it says HB 1, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, and it shows all the lists of the House bills, or the House amendments to the budget that were attached, and then you have this one, which the staff calls the summary review sheet, or the SR, and which we, much to their chagrin, call the cheat sheet. But anyway, so what we'll do is, to understand these, if you go down and look, you can see that just not quite half of the amendments that were adopted in the House were identical amendments to those in the Senate. And so, as we know, those are dealt with essentially. And so then the rest of them you see down below the line, the following other adopted amendments, and you see those down as we go down here. So, going to the summary sheet, what you'll have here, if you go to the, and it should say Standing Committee Summary Sheet, House Position. So what we're doing is talking about what the House did. You have to kind of compare that and contrast that in your mind with what you remember that the Senate did. And if you've got questions about that, we can answer some of those. But Mr. President, just going down through those, if you look through the first one, you'll see that on the first page, first page of the summary sheet, you'll see about the top 13 or so. And then if you get around, you see in the middle there's a line related. Everything above that were identical amendments. So we're not going to spend any time talking about the identical amendments. You can see what those are. Then the next group, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 more, and those are related. Those were ones that we passed things very, very similar in the House or the Senate, and so those are related, and there's 4 House amendments that you see there. Going through those very quickly, you'll see that there was in H3007A, there was an amendment that was very close to another one that was then in here. The only difference between those two is we took the 150 out and they didn't. And so that was the difference there. Then you get to the next one down, you'll see just some technical corrections that they did down there that we did not do down here. We'll talk more about those later, but those were just technical corrections. Then down below that, you see another one this is on community service expansion, or the community juvenile service boards. They had $3 million down there. We had $1.2 million down here. So we'll find, we'll work towards those resolutions. Then you'll see also in House Bill Second Reading Amendment 52, you'll see that we also have a like one there, and that has to do with the Shop Wyoming programs. And we had it at the University of Wyoming, and they had it in the University of Wyoming and the Business Council. So that's the reconciliation there. Then the rest of these are ones that were one-offs. We either had some down here that we defeated, or we didn't have ones down here that did these same things. So you see there's one as Secretary of State. This would amend now what that does is just add money. There's basically $64,000 for every constitutional amendment we pass out of here. It's $64,000 in publication costs. That adds those into the Secretary of State's office. So however many we pass out of here, we need to make sure that the Secretary of State has the publication money necessary to do those. Dropping down to the next one, you see the 3003 amendment, also State Treasurer. They removed the Chief Executive Officer and did not require the IFC to recommend the position. And does not require the FC recommendation. We left that one alone up here. Next down below, next one was a one-off that down there that has a $70,000 of money that can be expended for Rangeland Health Assessment Program grants. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a difference. That's a program that's been in before. It's never a lot of money, and ultimately it kind of gives the ability for some state resources to do what the federal government does, but doesn't in some areas. Next, going to the next page, you'll see this was one that we didn't have down here. It adds $10 million for various trails, for walking paths and bicycle paths and different things around the state that we didn't even talk about down here. That's what that one does. The next one is Second Reading Amendment 13 on construction management. You'll see that it makes, we had one, similar one down here. I think we talked a little bit, that it makes that $1 million appropriation effective immediately, so they can get to start on fixing the acoustics in the Capitol here. Next one down there is third reading amendment number 11 to the Department of Health. We did this one off, but they had passed this one. We talked about this one. We had this discussion and thought that the department could find that $1 million in his to do that match, and they didn't need to do that. But that was the difference down here. Here, the next one is second reading amendment 27, University of Wyoming, and this was included a study on carbon dioxide from coal-fired or other sources of electrical generation, and include those in public works projects. My recollection is I think we defeated that one down here, but it was passed in the House. The next one is another one that requires a report from the Joint Interim Committee on the number of appeals and decisions in favor of the residential taxpayer and county assessor. I think we defeated that one down here. And my recollection was that somebody from the floor was actually reading the results of those off a website on whether they were, how those appeals were resolved. Next one was one we did not talk down here. It took $6 million and added it to the municipal solid waste landfill remediation account. That account's fine for now, but in a few years it'll need more money, and so they did something down there to try and address that. But we didn't have that discussion down here. Below that is second reading amendment 44, section 300 on employee compensation. This one we did talk about additional employee compensation for highway patrol, but this one adds another $10,800,000 to the compensation package that we all talked about. That's basically $52 million. This would add another $10.8 million to that compensation package to be administered by the executive. Next one is third reading amendment 44, another 300. So some energy matching funds. It says out of the $100 million that's granted for those projects, it requires $10 million of appropriation for energy matching purposes in this section for public infrastructure for commercial energy development. What that has to do with, there's two coal mines. There's one in Carbon County and one in, I think, Lincoln County. And if they're going to continue to mine, they got to move some roads. And if they're not U.S. highways, they're state highways or county roads. Continuing on, the next one is third reading amendment 25, which is cash-based budgeting. It requires some reports, but the interesting part is it also actually required us to get ready to do the next budget on cash-based budgeting. But and then interestingly, it took it requires the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investment to study cash-based budgeting and report by November 15th of this year. And so we didn't have that discussion down here, but that's very interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about more of that as we go forward. Next one is third reading amendment 31, Wyoming's Tomorrow. We've talked about that. We had that discussion. That bill, the Wyoming's Tomorrow bill, is in the House, is over here now. We'll have that discussion. And so if we pass that bill, we can always talk about when we fund that. But that's what that does. It funds it the same way we talked about, and that defeated that amendment here, but it was passed in the House. Next one is third reading amendment 40. This created this one actually created a threshold for deposit for the permanent trust fund and common school permanent land reserve accounts. It raises, I think those accounts now are at 150% of the spending policy. This would raise those two reserve accounts to 225% of the spending policy amount, closely tied in with the one above it. As second reading amendment 33, those actually have a lot of interplay between them. Just bring that to your attention. And finally, third reading amendment 45, which is also a retirement cost of living payment. What it would do is it would take and make a one-time payment. So everybody in the Wyoming Retirement Fund would get a 13th payment this year if that were to pass. And so we didn't have that discussion out here and didn't vote on that, but that's what that one would do, would give a one-time cost of living payment to retirees. So with that, Mr. President, that's a quick explanation of the differences that the House did from what we did. We'll stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Discussions or questions on this? Appreciate all the appropriations work. Questions? Let's go to Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the last one, House 45, regarding the retirement account, that $5 million, where exactly does that come from? I have heard from, some of these folks, and so I'm just curious. I can't track exactly where that's coming from, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Let's collect a few more. Chairman Perkins, you want to go straight to it? Go ahead.
Whatever your pleasure is, Mr. President. What this is, if you read there, it comes out of the retirement account. And so the income from the retirement funds come into the retirement account and it's paid out of that. So there's only one source of funds that comes from, and those are the investments off the retirement accounts. We can have that discussion longer, but ultimately, it's money money in the retirement plan is worth a whole lot more now than it is in the future. And we kind of had that discussion when we were talking about Fireman A. This creates a one-time COLA, if you would, out of those retirement funds. And so we'll have that discussion. We'll have that discussion whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just comes out of the retirement account. And it obviously will have, it's a small amount when you compare it to the retirement as a whole, but those have long-reaching effects, as we saw in Fireman A, when you start to move in this direction.
Further questions or discussion? Let's go to Senator Byman.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question, I'm looking at page 2 of the cheat sheet here, and it's the $10.8 million salary increase in Section 300 that was adopted down the hall. The question is that in addition to any other salary increases, or were these folks left out of getting their salary raise, and that's what this amendment does? Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you taking that, Mr. Vice President?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Woo. That was electrifying. Mr. President, the answer to my colleague's question is yes, this is above and beyond what the governor's compensation request was. So that's an addition.
Thank you. We're still taking questions. Questions on budget, House Bill 1. That's it. Okay. Back on the bill then. There being no further discussion on House Bill 1. All right, there being no further discussion on House Bill 1, in accordance with Joint Rule 14-1G and Joint Rules 14-1H, House Bill 1 is referred directly to a conference committee of 5 members from each house to meet to resolve the differences between the houses with respect to both budget bills. Senate File 1 and House Bill 1. House Bill 1. All right, conference committee. House Bill 1, Senate File 1, Perkins, Kinski, Hicks, Steinmetz, and Guru. Okay, Mr. Floor Leader. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I move we stand recessed till 2 p.m.
All right. Announcements? Any announcements? Senator Perkins, is that an announcement?
Yes, it is an announcement. Your Senate Appropriations will meet in about, let's just call it 12:30 to give the folks give them a chance to grab a bite to eat. On noon recess today in State Capitol Room 301 and online to take up the following bills: bid rejection or denial for public works contracting, and House Bill 6 engrossed, ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects.
Up to Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Labor and Health Committee for number 10 will meet tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. in room 6 of the divider to hear first House Bill 110, Board of Psychology, Behavioral Analyst Regulations, House Bill 117, Occupational Therapy License Compact, House Bill 108, Funeral Service Practitioner Amendments. And a reminder that tomorrow is Dr. Seuss Day, reading across America, so wear your Dr. Seuss thing.
Okay. We're gonna finish with you last, Mr. Floor Leader, because you gotta take both committee and reconsideration of the time. Senator Case?
Mr. President, your committee number 3 revenue will be meeting shortly Maybe you got time to grab your lunch and head for the committee room. We'll be taking up House Bill 65 in gross county tax protest filing date, and that'll be in W6, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to the floor leader. We've got a couple of things going on,
Thanks,
both
Mr.
committee and
President.
time. Go ahead.
Your committee, number 7, corporations, will meet Thursday, March 3, 8 a.m. in State Capitol Room W110 to take up House Bill 62 engrossed insurance amendments, House Bill 55 engrossed liquor licenses, airport exemption, House Bill 15 engrossed political subdivision club liquor licenses, and if time permits, House Bill 60 engrossed fiscal training and enforcement of financial reporting laws, and House Bill 76 engrossed single office real estate brokers license requirements. In addition, your committee number 7 will meet Tuesday, March 8th at 8 a.m. in State Capitol Room 110 and online to discuss interim topics. Last but not least, I need to restate our motion to come back out.
Okay, listen to this, folks.
We have a ceremony next door at 2 o'clock that I overstepped on. So, Mr. President, I move that we stand recessed until 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Just a reminder, folks, in regards to our program there, that's open seating. They want you in place, seated, ready to go at 2 o'clock. Okay. All right, with that, heard the motion for 3 p.m. restated. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Senate will reconvene at 3 o'clock. Thank you.